Being pregnant and expecting a child is one of the most incredible experiences life has to offer. Losing that baby is devastating. It certainly was for me when I had a miscarriage around 10 weeks.
Well,
Today's guest is going to share her story with us because what is the impact when that loss happens much later in the pregnancy, even close to full term? Sarah Page, thank you so much for joining me.
thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
I would love to just invite you to tell us your story of your loss of a baby and how that brought you to doing what you're doing today.
Okay, so I was pregnant with my second child, and at 38 weeks, I kind of instinctively knew something was wrong. I'd seen my midwife earlier on in that week. She'd listened to the heartbeat, everything sounded fine, everything seemed fine. And then one day I didn't feel like there was any movement, and it just didn't feel right. And I did all the things that they tell you to do, like drinking cold drinks or, prodding my stomach, and wasn't really getting any response. So at that point, I phoned my midwife, and she said to me that you need to get yourself to the hospital. And yeah, it was a day that I won't ever forget. Because when the sonographer came to listen to the heartbeat, there was no heartbeat. And then hearing those words, "Your baby has no heartbeat," was just, I don't think I could really comprehend it, to be honest. I felt my husband's hand squeezing mine so tightly. And then all these things start going through your head of, what now then? Like, how is this sort of thing managed? So we were sent home that evening, to go back the following day to be induced, to have our baby. So even that night, I can remember lying there just thinking about the fact that I had, my dead child inside me, which was very difficult. Yeah, waking up in floods of tears, really trying to wrap my head around that. But there are also lots of positives, I suppose. I don't know whether you call them positives. I feel positive about them. The midwives that delivered her and the support that we received in the hospital was just phenomenal. It was unbelievable. My husband was set up with a camp bed next to my bed. He was allowed to stay there throughout the whole period. And before you go through the experience, they talk to you about, how do you want to manage it? And I can remember one of my biggest fears being holding the baby afterwards. And we didn't know at this point either whether we were having a boy or a girl. Because obviously that's one of life's biggest surprises. I didn't want to know. That's you kind of, yeah, you're looking forward to knowing. And in this situation, it was quite different. And I said I was scared about holding her and her feeling lifeless. And they sort of swaddled her up, and we got to cuddle her and hold her. So that was an incredibly difficult experience, the whole going through the labor and knowing what the outcome was going to be. Um, the next day, though, I have fond memories of, because they asked if we wanted to invite our family in, and my mum, my dad, my brother all came to the hospital, and they brought our daughter, Libby Jane, into the room in a little Moses basket, and my family got to meet her. I have this one memory of my brother, who's 6'8". He's huge, he's so tall, standing against a wall and seeing her, and sort of sliding down this wall into this crouched position, a tiny little ball, and sobbing. And even those memories for me, I think in these situations, a lot of the time people don't know what to say. And I think that people want to be strong for you. But the fact that my family cried and cried with me was actually, I really appreciated the friends that did that, actually. I really did. And it just kind of demonstrated the love that surrounded her. And I think that the thing is we didn't get to create memories with Libby, but the memories that we've created since have been really, really, really special. When we arrived at her funeral, my brother had written her a letter from himself, his wife, and his daughter, my niece, which was just beautiful. It was so beautiful what he wrote, and we wanted that to be with her. So we put that letter with her when she was cremated, as though it was going up there with her. And my husband and I were just incredibly fortunate. You realise the power of connections. We had such a strong support network that I felt like I was just encased in this bubble of love and protected. And I could always talk about her. And these were the friends that would sit and talk and say her name and cry with me, and still talk about missing her to this day, still talk about how they remember the sequence of events leading up to it too. And that's been really important to me, that, you know, we can say her name, and it's those people that actually asked me about her that were brave enough to ask me about the experience that I'll be forever grateful for. I think I can remember thinking to myself, what am I going to say? And it was the people that actually asked, you know, did you go through the labor, and how was that? Gosh, that must have been difficult, and really wanted to know more about it to be able to support. And I think often in those situations, people don't like to touch on the subject. They're frightened of upsetting you. For me, that was something that I really, really valued and still value to this day. You know, 17 years on, she would have been 17 on the 9th of February. So, you know, you carry that with you forever, actually. And yeah, and it's the milestones, like I say, we celebrate the milestones. I can remember each of her birthdays, and what we did with friends, like setting off lanterns to wish her a happy birthday and things like that. So those sorts of things are really special, I think.
I remember that's where I connected with you, is on her birthday post that you made
Yeah.
on your profile. And I think it's absolutely beautiful that you honor her in this way, still to this day, because many people and in many families and cultures, there's a reaction of not ever wanting to speak about that person
Yeah.
again, not mentioning their name, and becomes so awkward. And I think it's such a beautiful thing that you are comfortable with talking about it and actually welcome it uh,
Yeah.
with the people around you. That must be very healing.
It is. I think for me as well, I think I found the first year quite hard,
Mm.
the naught to one. I think I can remember thinking, God, this pain is never going to go away. I'm never going to get over this. And then that expression, I learned that getting over it, you you don't. And actually I realized I don't want to. I don't. Even if I could have my time again, I would do the same. I wouldn't change it. Um, it's yeah, it's it's really hard to put it into words, but I think for me, one day, sadly, a similar scenario happened to our closest friends. The best man at our wedding and one of my bridesmaids, and they lost their daughter 30 minutes after birth. And it was almost a year to the day that we lost Libby. It was even their funerals were at the same place, and nearly a year to the day apart. Our daughters would have been friends if they'd survived, you know. But that was the day that my grief turned into somebody else's lifeline. And all of a
Mm.
sudden, I just felt this, you know, I felt like I was able to help my friend. And I remember going around to see them, and her parents were there, and her mum saying to me, you'll never know how much you've helped us.
Mm.
And at that point, I was already pregnant with our daughter, our rainbow baby, Amelie. And I think that having somebody for, I remember seeing people like that, that you sort of look and you go, okay, life can be okay, that these people have got through it. But to this day, we talk about our daughters all the time. And I think that that's the bit that helped me, and sharing the story, seeing how it helped my friend, is kind of why I like to do something to honor on LinkedIn as well, recognizing that grief isn't something that stays at home. And I don't think that many people realize that 1 in 4 pregnancies end in loss. And I
Mm.
think that people might often see it as a moment in time and don't realize that it's all the milestones that you miss, that it's something that you carry with you for life. And I think that the more people understand that, and the more that, we're able to support one another, the better. And for me, I think that my sad days became my happy days. I was actually happy to be sad. I was happy that I was still thinking about her every day.
Mm.
And I still do. Every single day I think about her.
Yeah, what an experience. Sure. You said it was your second pregnancy. How old or
Yeah.
how much older was your first child at the time?
So our son, Taylor, was 15 months old when we had Libby.
Mm.
So still a baby himself, really. And that was difficult too, because he started to walk. He took his first proper steps, not long after we'd had Libby.
Mm.
So then you start to see all these milestones, and it can feel a little bit bittersweet. You're
Mm.
so happy, you're like, this is amazing. And then it's quickly followed by the thought of, oh, I'm never going to see Libby do that.
Mm.
Um, so that side of it was a little bit challenging, I'd say. But
Mm.
then the flip side of that is my children are so, I know everybody's children are precious to them. I know that. Mine are super, super precious. And I think sometimes when you've had experiences like that in life, it changes your mindset a little bit. So in terms of where I am now, I know you asked that question earlier, that work-life balance, well-being, all of
Mm.
these things are things that I'm really, really passionate about. And I attribute a lot of that to Libby, because it does make you reflect on things, doesn't it? And what's important to you, and what you want to put first in your life, and that you want to treasure those moments that you've got. And I really try and advocate for that in my role as a people professional, like that well-being side of it. And then I think with the grief is that I learned to embrace it. It's just that you have to learn, you kind of learn to live a new normal. I think
Yeah.
see it like a jigsaw puzzle. There's always going to be one piece missing. There always will be, but you kind of learn to live with that. It's not like the grief leaves you,
Mm.
it's always there, but you have to embrace it.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about how that grief that you had to deal with
Mm.
affected parenting your older child, and also the pregnancy following that? Were you afraid of something going wrong? Were you extra vigilant? How did that affect you?
So, in terms of how it was with my son, I would say that I had one incredibly, incredibly special friend called Sam, who was my rock. And
Mhm.
she's the most amazing friend. And recognizing that I might find that difficult, and I did, I my routine for pretty much the whole maternity leave, because you still get the maternity leave when you've had a stillbirth.
Mhm.
My routine was, I would get Taylor ready, I would get in my car, and I would drive to Sam's, and I would spend the day with her. And she'd got a daughter not much older than Taylor, and would would just help me, would make sure that I had things to do, that we'd go and do things together. But she was there to try and help me create this happy environment for Taylor. Like
Mm-hmm.
that was so important to me. I think I couldn't have done it on my own. My parents live in France and my husband's parents live in Spain. So that support network, the friends, but this one friend in particular, um, was my savior. She was actually the person that took us to hospital to have Libby.
Mm.
Um, was there.
Sure. What a privilege to have such a friend, hey? Incredible.
Yeah, like she's an absolute inspiration, and she's like that with all of her friends. I'm honestly, I like I say, I could not have done it without her. She was like, my children call her Auntie Sammy. Um, and yeah, like I say, I think it was having that support and not being on my own. I was worried. Taylor actually is a really sensitive boy. And
Mhm.
there was a period in his childhood where he did, get upset and cry cry a lot, and I would worry, oh gosh, has he got that from me? Like the emotional side, maybe because of what he witnessed as a young child. But actually, we talk about the fact that we wear our heart on our sleeve, and I talk about how often being emotional can be perceived as a weakness, but it's actually a super strength, you know.
Mm.
So yeah, that's kind of how I would describe that side. And then with Amelie, our daughter, that pregnancy was, yeah, full of fear.
Mm.
They put you in the high risk category, so you have more scans. Because you have more scans, they see things that maybe look a little bit, abnormal, and they're
Mm.
raising that all the time, and it's panicked. Um, and because we lost Libby at 38 weeks, I was induced at 38 weeks with Amelie. And that, I mean, that pregnancy, even at the end, she'd been head down the whole time. We were ready to go, and we go to the hospital to be induced, and she decided to be breech.
Oh,
So
goodness.
yeah. So we were in hospital for a couple of days, and even then, after being induced, the sort of end bit, there were some complications, and they had to get the ventouse to finally get her out. And then she didn't cry straight away, and I can just remember just feeling so anxious. And again, we didn't know what we were having. We still didn't want to know. We didn't care. We just wanted a healthy baby. And yeah, gives me goosebumps now when I think about, you it's a girl. I didn't believe them. I was like, no, you must be wrong. And that, yeah, and that's one of the reasons as well why I would never change anything. Our daughter, both of our children, but our daughter Amelie, our rainbow baby, beautiful. Um, if Libby was here, she wouldn't be. We were only going to have two children. Amelie's so special, and both of our children have grown up knowing about Libby, and that's been really important. They know they've got an angel sister. They talk about her. We, like I say, we celebrate together on the birthday. We recognise. They've seen a photograph of her. All three of our children look identical as babies.
Really interesting.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Wow. Sure. It must be incredible also to grow up as a child knowing that there was a baby before you that is not with you.
Hmm.
I know I had a miscarriage between my two children, and the younger one who came afterwards, at some stage in his life, he's now 18, he would ask me about it. He was curious about it.
Hmm.
He would want me to tell him stories about how it happened and all sorts
Hmm.
of things. So it was as if, he had a connection and a knowledge. And if we look at the genetics these days, we know now that there is there is a connection. And if we look at family constellations, as some of the work that I do a lot is family constellations, every person has a place where they belong in the family constellation, even the ones that are not with us in this life or in this world, or
Mm.
depending on what you believe. But the children are also aware of it in their own way, even when they're small. Did you experience the same thing?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, Taylor was only 15 months, but one day mummy had a bump, and then after that she didn't.
Mm.
So I mean, he couldn't talk at that moment. When I look back at the photos, I've got pictures of him, as a toddler, sort of pushing
Mm.
my tummy and things. So I think yeah, he recognized that. And even when, like I say, the kids were quite small, I mentioned my mum and dad live in France. One of the things that my husband and I talked about was that we didn't want her to be buried in a graveyard. I couldn't bear the thought of that. But my parents have got the most beautiful home with an orchard in France, and we go there for family holidays. And we wanted her to be there. That house is going to be in our family. And so we sprinkled her ashes in the orchard there. So when we're on holiday, she's always with us.
Mm.
And my mum planted, I can't remember the exact name of them, but baby daffodils, which bloom at the
Oh,
time in
yes.
February. So there's a little bench there, and we can sit there and we can see
Mm.
these flowers come up on her birthday.
Oh,
And
that's beautiful.
when Emily was really little, I remember sitting on that bench with her and saying, "This is where your angel sister is she?" And she went, "Where is she? Is she hiding?" And we looked down, and there was a tiny white feather.
Wow.
And yeah, I like to say, when was it white feathers in air? Was it angels on air, or something? There's the expression. So there's just little
Yeah.
moments like that I don't know whether you like to believe in or not. Personally, I like to believe in those things. Even we decided to get married in France too. And even when I opened the front door on my wedding day, there was a little white feather
Wow.
on the floor.
Yeah.
So we chose to have our wedding there for that reason, so that she could be with us too.
Beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. So yes, so I see on social media you are quite the activist in terms of speaking up for the needs and the circumstances around people who
Mm.
experience this kind of loss. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what you do? And you've mentioned in some of your posts some of the changes that have come about to be more compassionate and more understanding and supportive of parents. Please tell us a bit more about that.
Well, in my role, I've worked in human resources my whole career. And even in that time, actually, in my role, obviously, supporting employees is a big factor.
Mm.
And you can imagine that with the 1 in 4 statistic, there have been employees in my career who've suffered the same loss.
Mm.
Um, and wanting to support those employees through it, again, for the same reasons that I said when it happened to the friend. It kind of gives Libby's life purpose, and
Mm.
it's nice, like I say, when your grief turns into that lifeline for somebody else. But I think that that's where there are so many things that can affect people, aren't there? But I also learned from my husband. My husband and I grieved very differently. There's no blueprint on grief
Mm.
of how long it's going to last, or how you cope with it. It's an individual thing. So that, I think, is where my passion for the well-being side came, and talking about it is to raise awareness, um, for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, really, that people don't always understand. Like, I remember one person saying to me, "Better luck next time,"
Sure. Mm.
and feeling quite upset about that. But
Mm.
I know that people don't always know the right thing to say, but I think when we share our experiences, It helps people to feel that they're not alone.
Mm.
And I would say that that's something that, if I was to think about the lessons that I've learned from losing Libby, there's so many that apply to just life in general.
Mhm.
The importance of building connections.
Mm.
So even in a work environment, in what I do in human resources, supporting people to build that network and
Mm.
create an environment where people can form friendships, because there's, yeah, when you're in that environment, that is when you're going to be most productive, when you're going to
Yes.
enjoy your work life, and shared experiences when we talk about them. Yeah, knowing somebody else has been through the same and being able to talk about it, is there's so much value in that, no matter what that is. It doesn't just apply to baby loss, it applies to any experiences in life. I think when you find other people who've walked a similar path to you, it can help to validate your feelings. I think sometimes I struggled to even find the words to explain how I felt. But then
Mm.
talking to other mums who had lost children and listening to them, it helped me make sense of my own feelings. And again, those are all things that apply to anything in life, I think. Um, but I was also really lucky because my employer at the time was amazing. My entire team came to Libby's funeral.
Mhm.
Um, they matched the donations we raised in her memory, um, supported me to return to work. So I think when you've been on the receiving end of that stuff, I worked in a people team anyway, but when you're on the when you are the employee and you're being looked after like that, that inspired me to want to do the same for others. You recognize the power of that. Like if you look after your people, the
Mm.
rest
Mhm.
kind of takes care of itself, doesn't
Yes.
it?
Yeah, it does, eh?
Yeah. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does. And it's incredible how people can rally around to support
Mhm.
in times of need. It's absolutely heartwarming to hear that your whole team attended Libby's funeral. It's beautiful. And you're fortunate to have that around you, especially because your parents are not close. Um,
I think that they found that really hard, as did
mhm.
my husband's parents. And as a parent, I totally understand that. My mum said to me that she would walk over hot coals, go to hell and back to prevent me from experiencing that pain.
Mm.
Um, and she feels the same pain. She lost a granddaughter. She
Yes.
she
Mm.
um, posts about it on social media
Mm.
to keep the memory alive too. I think it impacts the whole family like that. But that the power of connection, the friendships, the support, it's so important. But I think one thing that I would like to talk about, maybe in terms of raising awareness, is that point that I touched on in terms of how my husband and I grieve quite differently.
Mhm.
Because as a man, he didn't really have that same level of support. Men don't often know how to talk about these
Mhm.
things. He didn't really open up about the depth of his pain until Libby's 10th birthday. That's really how long it took us to be able to talk about it
Sure.
openly. And I think that a lot of the focus is on the mum.
Mm. Mhm.
He is self-employed, had to go back to work quite quickly. You know, for him, it was, yeah, it's 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 difficult. The dad's hurt too,
Mm, they do. Yeah.
but yeah, I think that it's important to raise awareness about that side. And there's a lot of stuff now in terms of we have SANS is a charity in the UK
Mhm.
that does a tremendous amount to support bereaved parents. I think they've got like a football team that they put together where fathers who've lost their baby can, yeah, play football together, and they've got that connection. Those sorts of things are so important. I think that there are, yeah, it's not just the mums that hurt, it's the dads too.
Apologies, I seem to have a frog in my throat.
That's okay.
It's incredible. I'm thinking about here in South Africa where I am. I haven't come across any official organizations or movements supporting dads specifically. It's almost as if we take for granted that the loss is the mother's and the fathers are not as close or not as attached. And as you said, it's just different. Um, I remember when I had my miscarriage, I was the one to actually file it away deeply because I had to focus on functioning and taking care of my other child and everything, while the father, who is now my ex-husband, he cried and he expressed his emotions and his disappointment and his sadness and his grief freely, and he managed to move on. And I ran into somebody I knew 6 months later who asked me, "And how are you doing, considering what had happened?" And for the first time, I was confronted with it. And I burst into tears right there. And that was the first time I was able to cry. So, yes, we do grieve differently, even
Mhm.
men and women. And when I grieved in a way that's not common for mothers who lose their babies. And we need to support everybody, even the extended family, the grandparents. Everybody has this excitement and expectation, like I said in the beginning, looking forward to this new child who's coming into the family. So the loss is tremendous for a lot of people, even friends and extended family members. And I think we need to really raise that awareness, that we need to hold the space for everyone.
Yeah, and I think it's about trying to respect those people. I mean, I was somebody that liked to talk about it. I think sometimes people don't know what to say, but even so, there are no words. I don't, I don't know what to say, but please, if there's anything that I can do to support you,
Mm,
you know, tell me what you need. Like, how can I help? Um, that sort of thing really means a lot because, like I
mm,
said, there is no blueprint for grief. We all have
mm,
our own different coping strategies that we develop. Um, I just think that that's that compassion, isn't it?
mm,
And
mm.
yeah, how we show one another support.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's so important. And these are all the things that I think that when I think about, so people say to me in my role often, you're so empathetic, you're really caring, you're all of these things. A lot of how you become, like, after experiencing that loss, like what
Mm,
I received, I kind of really felt the benefit of it was so powerful that then I wanted to give it back even more. I think I'm naturally empathetic anyway,
mhm,
but I like to attribute a lot of that to Libby. I think that my strength comes from how I never knew how strong I was, to be fair.
mm,
Had always been perceived as emotional, but I think if you get through something like that, resilience as
mm,
well, these all of these things that are really valuable skills to
mm,
have in life. I think that's how she lives. That's how I like to say that she is my strength, she is my
mm,
resilience, she is my
mm.
love, she is my support, she is all these things. That's how she lives.
I love that's beautiful. That's how she lives. And you also touched on something very important, which I think we need to be mindful of, and that is to ask people what they want and what they need.
Hmm.
Because the needs are different for people, and the needs might change from day to day. Somebody might need a meal today, and tomorrow to be by themselves and have peace and quiet. And the next day they might want company. So I
Yeah.
think it's important to ask, and maybe to ask regularly, and to have an open invitation for people to reach out should they need anything. And then some
Yeah.
people find it difficult to ask for help or to accept support also. So that can also make it quite challenging.
Yeah, it can do. And sometimes actually the memories that I have that I really appreciate, there were no words, to be fair. Just even having somebody there with you.
Just the presence
Yeah,
and
just like,
silence.
yeah, not talking about it. Just, yeah, I think I'd be lost in my own thoughts, but in the comfort that I wasn't alone, that my friend was with me or my
Yeah.
husband was with me. I think that that's important too. Yeah, and it is difficult because I'm always mindful of that. I don't want to be, what worked for me is not necessarily going to work for somebody
Mm.
else. And
Mhm.
I touched on SANS, and there are lots of organisations in the UK that are there specifically to support bereaved parents and that do a tremendous amount in terms of um, delivering training to organisations,
Mm.
delivering training to like nursing staff, which is just invaluable. And for me, SANS also had a forum that I for bereaved parents, which was kind of like yeah, your social media,
Mm.
but
Mhm.
just for bereaved parents. And
Yes.
I remember when I first logged on there thinking, oh, I can't do this. I'm not,
Mm.
this is not going to help me. Um, because reading other people's stories to begin with was quite painful.
Mm.
Um, but over time, actually, the connections that I made on there, um, that was a big part in coming to terms and learning to live with my grief,
Mm.
because there was such a selection of parents on there, or mothers. You've got some mothers that were still posting on there that it was kind of 10, 20 years on from their loss,
Yeah.
versus some mothers that had literally just experienced it, and
Mm.
all sharing their experiences of the situation.
Mm.
Um, and that's what I mean about finding others who have walked a similar path to you
Yeah.
and learning from that experience, but taking comfort from it. And it kind of validates your feelings as well,
Mm.
I think is
Well,
really
that's the
important.
power and the strength of community, and we know
Yeah.
how important that is
Mm.
to carry us through the difficult times. Yeah. There's always more that we can do. So, Sarah, tell me, you wrote briefly about a beautiful story of serendipity when you mentioned
Yes.
your son and his
Yeah.
girlfriend. Will you share that with us?
Yeah, of course. I love Libby to pieces. Still Taylor's girlfriend now. Um, Yeah, I just feel like life's found some beautiful ways to remind us that Libby's always going to be with us.
Mhm.
So, last year when Taylor turned 17, he introduced us to his first girlfriend. And unbelievably, her name is Libby.
Mm.
So, yeah, it feels like serendipity. There are these little moments in life where you just think these special moments. Like I don't think you forget your first boyfriend or your first girlfriend,
Mm. Mhm.
and the fact that she's called Libby, is just wonderful. And she's the most beautiful girl inside and out. And we've had some lovely experiences together. The two of us actually went to a live concert together to see a band that I used to love in the 90s, and
Mhm.
it was somebody that she liked, and it was just the two of us, and
Yeah.
the power of those shared experiences. And for me it was just, yeah, super special that we have a Libby in our lives.
Mm.
um yeah, and that, like I say, that she's our son's first girlfriend. She's like part of the family now, to be fair, because it's been over a year that they've been together. So it was just a lovely moment, a really lovely
Yeah.
moment that felt meant to be. And the first time she was introduced, she came to a family dinner, she was introduced to my sister-in-law, and she got a little tear in her eye when she realized what her name was. So it was
Yeah.
something that meant something to everybody. Yeah.
What a special moment. What an amazing story. I love it. It's yeah.
Yeah. What are the chances?
Yeah, the way life rolls out for us, hey? Unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I want to just take a moment and acknowledge your loss. It's tremendous for you and for your whole family, but also what you've shared with us about your journey so long. It's been so many years, and
Hmm.
it's absolutely beautiful how you still honor your daughter, and as it should be, and your family. She has her place in your family and in your day-to-day lives, literally, and that's inspiring. I'm
Thank
so
you.
grateful for the opportunity to hear your story, and grateful for you for sharing this. And I'm sure anybody who's going to watch this or listen to this is going to find solace in this, in your experience, and learn from it.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
really do hope so. Yeah, it's a difficult experience, but I hope that the one thing that people take from this, whether you've lost a child or not, it was when I try and raise awareness, it's not just for bereaved parents, it's telling the story of Sam, my friend, who was my rock,
Mm,
um,
mm,
my family, being there to meet her, my employer, being, matching the donations, my entire team coming to her funeral, because those are the memories that I treasure.
mhm.
And yeah, that support is, you can't put a price on it, really, you
Yeah,
can't.
yeah.
And like I say, those are the things that I will be forever grateful for.
Mm. It is absolutely precious, and
Mm,
something you're going to have and carry with you for always.
yeah,
Um, yeah, that's fortunate, very fortunate. I deal with many people who deal with grief, and many are on their own by themselves and abandoned, and maybe lost all their loved ones, and they're by themselves. So yeah, to have a good, strong support structure is really, really valuable. I have.
yeah. I really feel for those people, actually. I mean, I don't know, I wouldn't have been able to get through it, actually, in
Mm,
fairness, if it hadn't been for the support surrounding me.
yeah. Can I jump over to the technical side and
Yeah.
ask, on a medical level, do you know what caused the stillbirth? Was there any uh, conclusion about why it happened?
So I think that's probably one of the things that was quite difficult in terms of the conversation that I referred to when we went in to be induced,
Mm-hmm.
because one of the things that the medical staff ask you is if you'd be prepared for them to do an autopsy to
Mm-hmm.
determine
Mm-hmm.
the cause of death. And I think in our situation, we had Taylor, so I knew that there was nothing wrong in terms of mine and my husband's capability, like to have a child. We had a really healthy son. Um, and personally, I really I didn't want to go down that route. I couldn't bear the
Mm-hmm.
thought of, her being um yeah, touched like that. Um, but what we did agree to was having the placenta examined and everything else, just yeah, um, without really touching her. And what transpired was that my umbilical cord was hypercoiled, they said. So normally it's like a spring, and I think it's
Mm-hmm.
normally 0.2 millimeters in terms of the coils, and in
Mm-hmm.
my case it was 0.02, so they would have been incredibly tightly coiled. And there was a slight, not, abnormality with the placenta too, so there was talk about maybe her being able to get the nutrients that she needed.
Mm,
Um, I think my brother said to me that his biggest fear was, you know, if the umbilical cord had been around her neck or something like that, he would,
mm,
that sort of thing. It was nothing like that. I think it was an extra long umbilical cord, and it was hypercoiled.
okay.
Was the reason that that it was could have been a contributing factor.
Mm,
But yeah, for for me, she was she was she was gone, and knowing why wasn't going to bring her back. So it wasn't something that I really, I didn't want to go down the autopsy route.
yeah.
That was just a personal thing that for my husband and I.
Mm,
I think different circumstances are different. I think for our friends that lost their child after birth, sometimes you want to kind of understand, well, what's gone on there in terms of the whole delivery process. But Libby had already died in my tummy.
mm,
So yeah, yeah, knowing why, I wouldn't there's nothing I would be able to do to change that.
yeah. I think it also is different for different people.
Mm,
And in that moment, I think it's a good thing that you have the option to make such decisions and
yeah,
choices, which
for
is very
sure.
important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Because I think for some people it would be really important to try and understand what's gone on. Again, like I say, it's everybody's different. I'm not like trying to write a rule book on how you cope with losing a child. I think I've
Mm,
learned from so many different people that, we all deal with it differently. I always find it
yes.
fascinating, actually. Even my friend that lost her child after birth would say to me, I can't begin to imagine what it was like for you going into labor and knowing what the outcome was going to be. Whereas I'm like, I can't imagine what it was like for you to lose, your daughter just half an hour afterwards. Like you go
Mm,
through and you hear your baby cry, and then
yeah.
she's gone. So there are so many different
Mm,
scenarios, and I've come to meet some really amazing people from sharing the experiences, and then sadly also some people that I already knew, but I didn't know they'd lost their
right, yeah.
child, and you start to talk about it. So yeah, like I say, it happens to a lot of people, which is why I want to raise the awareness.
Mm. And it must be difficult, I mean, incredibly difficult when you're in that situation to have to deal with such technical medical issues and make decisions, whereas it's really not a good time to make those decisions, and you have to
Mm,
a whole number of decisions in that
hmm.
moment. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And I think you saying that, actually, the point that I made earlier in terms of being frightened about seeing her body,
Mm,
I was frightened. That was a fear that I had, so that when they gave Libby to us to hold, she was swaddled, and we could see her face, and now I look back and I think I never saw her little body, and I wish I had have done, but at the time it was something that really scared me.
mm,
So yeah, it is difficult, definitely difficult to make those decisions at a
yeah.
time when your brain just can't really compute what's going
No,
on. It doesn't kind of, I just remember waking up every morning going, was it a nightmare? Oh my God, no, that did happen.
yeah, yeah, sure. Life surely dishes out some serious challenges to us at times. Losing a child is way up there at the top of the list, I think.
Mm,
And I can't, yeah, imagine what it's like to lose a child at any age, actually,
mm,
after they were born. Wow, yeah, sure. So, I'm glad to hear that in the UK there's much more support for fathers. I wanted to ask you, getting the maternity leave, even if you have lost your child,
mhm.
is that a standard thing in the UK?
So in terms of the situation with Libby, because she was born at 38 weeks. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe it's yeah, it's after 24 weeks, it's considered a stillbirth. And
Mm.
with stillbirth, you are still entitled to take your maternity leave. So I did do that. And you
Mm.
probably saw on the post that you read some of the recent laws in the UK as well, or some of it's not law, but in 2020, I think it was that they introduced parental bereavement leave. So
Mm.
if you lost a child, that you had that
Yeah.
bereavement leave. But just last year, baby loss certificates to
Yes, that was.
acknowledging a loss before that 24 weeks too. So I can imagine how, oh, I can't even think of the words, but I can imagine for those parents that have lost a child before that 24 weeks, how much that would mean to them.
Mm. So
That,
that would be
yeah,
as you would get a birth certificate, you get this baby
baby loss
loss.
certificate. Yeah, it's kind of
Yeah,
acknowledging that you've
that's
had a
yes.
child. And I think that that's
Mm.
acknowledging
Mm. Mhm.
that you've had a child is so, so important. I
Yes.
really do think that that's, again, like I say, I like to talk about Libya all the time, and I know that a lot of people that have lost their baby, you probably read some of the comments on my post for that, that resonated with other parents that had lost their child and how they like to do the same and how they have their ways of remembering their child. One lady lights a candle every Sunday to remember her daughter. She
Mm.
commented on the post. So um, I think it's a big step forward, like acknowledging it. But I do think that there's still a lot more to do when you consider the statistic of 1 in 4
Yes.
pregnancies. That's not
Mm.
1 in 4 people, that's 1 in 4 pregnancies,
Mm.
is
Mm. It's
uh,
very high.
a scary statistic.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, it's actually hair raising. But I mean,
Mm.
loss during pregnancy and even death of mothers during pregnancy, those things have been part of human existence for as long as we know. But it's still in this day and age with the technology and the science that we have, unbelievable that the statistic is that high. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And I think what astonishes me is the figure's that high, but it's still rarely talked about.
Isn't it interesting? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so when you consider how many people would be affected
Mm.
by it, um, and I think that there is, yeah, still a stigma around that side of thing, talking about it. And I suppose again, that's why I like to try and break the silence. I think the more open we are, the less alone people will feel, and trying to create this ripple effect where we all talk about these things more openly,
Mm.
um, want to rewrite the narrative on that. I think it would,
Yes.
yeah, help you build connections. Like I say, I've made so many friends through it that I would not have made. The
Yeah.
connection, the reason that we've made that connection is because we've been through it, and
Mm.
those bonds are really special. And I think, like I say, that principle applies to lots of things in life. If we were to talk openly about those things and experiences that we've had, um, whether they're, like your positive experiences or things that you can learn from, yeah, it's valuable sharing those.
Yeah. And I'm a firm believer that everything that we receive through such an experience, the loss, the grief, the support, the love, everything that comes to us in that experience fills up our baskets, and that's what we can hand out again to others who
Hmm.
go through the same experiences. So it's a wealth of knowledge and experience and wisdom that we gain, even though it's so very, very painful.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think I, well, hopefully what's come across in talking to me are the things that I'm grateful for too. I realized what a tremendous group of friends I had. I
Mm.
realized how lucky I was with the employer that I worked for.
Mm.
I appreciated how wonderful the midwives were.
Mhm.
there are all these things that when I look back on it, I'm grateful for, which might seem strange to
Mm.
some people given the loss, but it kind of magnifies all of those other areas in your life. You
It
feel
does. Eh?
tremendously grateful for it.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
and I think perhaps those are things that maybe you take a little bit for granted until you have an experience like that. And then
Mm.
you're like, wow, I realize how lucky I was then to have
Yeah.
that around me now. And I
Mm.
appreciate all of those things all the more even
Mhm.
now.
Yeah. As you said in the beginning, the positives, although one
Mm.
wouldn't want it feels awkward to call it that, eh?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It really does feel like that. But like I say, I think with that, that's for me, I think that's how Libby lives. That's the way that I see
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
Um, I'm, very proud of her for that fact. That might sound
Yeah.
strange as well, but no, I am.
That sounds
proud of
beautiful.
proud
Yeah.
of um well, I think what I mean by that is experiences in life, they're what make you who you are. So
Mm.
when I look at who I am now, the kind of person I am now, I wouldn't be this person had I not experienced that loss, would I? I would,
Mm.
I would be a different person now because all of these things in life are lessons or gifts.
Mm.
I see it as a gift. Yeah, she's not here with us in in person, but definitely in spirit and always in my heart.
And I just had a thought as I was listening to you. I often talk about the life lessons that my children teach me and the gifts that they bring me in living
Mm.
with me. But this is such a beautiful example of a child that teaches you lessons and bring you gifts, even though she's not living alongside you.
Hmm.
And still to this day. So it's absolutely beautiful that the idea that it happens that way. Yeah. Huh. Fascinating. And can I ask you one last question in closing? I want
Cool.
to come back to your husband. You told us a little bit about him, and we talked about
Hmm.
how fathers are grieving too and hurting too when they lose their children. And you mentioned that it took 10 years for him to be able to speak openly and freely about his grief.
Mm.
What would you say to other women, mothers in a similar situation? Or families for that matter, the world out there, what can we do to support our husbands better when this happens, to support our sons or our fathers?
Yeah, it's a really
Wherever you
tricky
are.
question to answer. I think with my husband, he works in the construction industry.
Mm.
And so when you think about that as a working environment, I think it's, yeah, the and also as a sole trader, self-employed,
Mhm.
you kind of didn't have the connections at work that I had. So there
Mm.
was different levels. And I'm not entirely sure what it was about her 10th birthday. It was something about that milestone, and we went to have lunch together, and it was the most open conversation that we'd ever had. Maybe it was the point at which we were both able to reflect and not not with our emotions so heightened, I don't know, because of the time that had passed. Um, I think though, like what he opened up about was the depth of his pain and the fact that he'd had that pain. He'd been carrying that for the decade that I had too. So maybe I would be saying to other people in that situation to just be aware of the fact of just because a man's not showing his emotions
Mm.
doesn't mean that he's not feeling them, to sort of be attent to what's going on inside.
Yeah.
Um, and for my husband, actually, the one thing I do remember is sharing a poem with him, which was called A Dad Hurts Too.
Hmm.
And probably being one of only a couple of times that I've seen my husband cry, because when I read the words, he said, that's exactly how I feel.
Mm.
And I think
Mm.
that sometimes too, that side can be quite hard trying to find the words to
Mm.
communicate it. So yeah, And we realized at that conversation at the 10-year point where he said to me, I can never imagine what you went through, because I will never know what it's like to carry a child and to feel that child's movements, to then only lose that child. And I said to my husband, I'll never know what it's like to sit and hold the hand of someone you love and watch them go through that pain and be powerless to stop it. Like
Yeah,
he was there throughout the whole thing, and you can't do anything
yeah,
to take the pain of childbirth away, that sort of thing as well. Because I
yeah,
think in his head he was just like, not only have you got the mental pain, but you're going through this childbirth, and I'm powerless to. I wish I
mm,
could share it with you in some way other than hold your hand. So
mm,
I think understanding both sides of that there's different experiences, aren't there? But it was interesting. I don't know why it was that it was 10 years that it took for us to actually have those conversations.
I'm so glad I asked you this question, because what you explain now about him being next to you and probably feeling helpless is, I think, really, really profound. I haven't thought of that, like, I haven't thought of it like that as such. It's really, I think, important that we're aware of that. Because
Yeah,
the
for sure.
statistics, yeah, the statistics are also quite high in terms of marriages that fall apart when a child is lost. So it puts a lot of strain on a relationship as well. And probably the different ways of grieving makes it very difficult.
Well, I definitely think that that's the case, and I think that from what I've just described, I can remember, not I knew that my husband cared, but um, yeah, when not showing the emotion so much, like I suppose because, like I say, I wear my heart on my sleeve, and my husband very much internalized all of those things. That's why it's so important to understand those sorts of things. But I can imagine how it could impact
Mm.
a marriage if one person wants to talk about it and the other person is not
Yeah.
ready to, or yeah. Which is why I think, like I say, go back to the support of the friends around you.
Yes.
But
Mm.
I do remember having that conversation where we recognized each other's
Mm.
pain in that situation, and recognized that whilst I carried the child, he had to hold my hand, you know,
Mm.
and know that you can't fix it. Because I think when you love somebody, your automatic thing, isn't it, when someone's experiencing a problem, you want to be able to support, you want to be able to take the pain away. And if you're feeling powerless, that's yeah, that must have been really hard for him to deal with,
Mm.
actually.
Mhm.
And I think that is also a contributing factor in terms of the grief that you feel, like that, yeah, the
Mm.
fact that you can do more to support your partner, maybe
Yeah.
it's a bit out of your
Yeah.
hands.
And it's hard to be in your own grief and
Mm.
having to support other people. That's really difficult to do in any case. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I actually think that work with the fathers as well, the mother gets the maternity leave, the father doesn't.
Mm.
The father has to go back to work often, like
Mm.
in that situation. So their life has to go back to what normal
Mm.
very, very quickly. And I think that then a coping strategy will be to kind of try and shut those
Yeah,
feelings off, because
yeah.
you
How
have
else?
you
Yeah.
have to go and get on. So I wonder if that was a contributing factor for my husband as well, in terms of it was a coping strategy. I still have to go to work. I need to try and get back to normal as quickly as possible. Whereas I was at home with our son.
Yeah. And it illustrates the importance of being able to pause and stop and just spend some time in that grief
Hmm.
before we carry on with the mad rush of life, eh? And
Yeah, for
not
sure.
everybody gets that opportunity.
Mm.
Sarah, thank you so much. This has been an absolutely beautiful conversation. I'm so grateful for everything that you've shared and your
Thank
wisdom that you've brought to this conversation. Thank you so much. And again, I wish you all of the best for you and your family. And I know grief is something that we carry with us forever, but you've made so many beautiful things of your
Thank you.
loss. And it's absolutely inspiring. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. It's been lovely to meet you as well. Thank you.